And the amazing thing about these kinds of restoration projects is that you can have the local benefits, which you can see and are tangible, and you can watch them unfold in front of your eyes within your neighborhood and within your community, but then also feel good about the broader benefits to the river. It's sort of scalable. There's the benefits to your community and your piece of the river, and then there's the benefit to the river network, and that also improves the link between the land and the ocean, as you were talking about earlier. It benefits the whole watershed. So being able to see the scaling up of benefits while you're experiencing them in your own backyard is a really powerful experience.
Welcome. In this session of Bio for Climate, Biodiversity for a Livable Climate, and GBH Forum Network's series, Life Saves the Planet. And this particular session is titled Drying Rivers and Drought, What We Can Do in Massachusetts. My name is Paula Phipps. I'm Associate Director of Biodiversity for a Livable Climate, and I'm going to introduce today's moderator, John Scholl, who is the co-founder with Bio for Climate of the Eco Restoration Alliance, and a longtime entrepreneur and activist in the common goods area. What's good for all. So, John, why don't you take it away?
Thank you, Paula. The Eco Restoration Alliance and Bio for Climate recognize that climate change these days is clearly impacting almost everyone, almost everywhere. But we're here to point out that almost everyone, almost everywhere also impacts climate change. And that's our big opportunity and our best hope. If we change our piece of the planet, we contribute to renormalizing everyone's planet. And so today we're focusing on a particular piece of the planet called Massachusetts, a particular aspect of that place, the rivers of Massachusetts. And we'll begin with a presentation from Danielle Dolan, Deputy Director of the Mass Rivers Alliance, who's going to talk about the state of the climate and the rivers of Massachusetts and the work of her organization, Mass Rivers Alliance. After that, we'll hear from Beth Lambert, Director of the Division of Ecological Restoration. And then we'll hear from Michal Kravcik, the author of The New Water Paradigm, who will talk about some new emerging principles of eco-restoration and water management, and talk about what we all can do and what we all can do better to renormalize the climate. So Danielle Dolan, we look forward to your presentation of about 10 minutes.
Thank you, John. And since John already introduced me, I don't need to introduce myself. So just say hi to everyone and thank you for joining us. Mass Rivers Alliance is the voice for rivers in the state. We're working to protect and restore healthy flows, thriving ecosystems, and access for all. As a nonprofit organization, we advocate for policies that protect rivers and against those policies that threaten rivers. We also provide support to our network of 83 local and statewide member organizations, strengthening the work that they are doing locally to protect and restore rivers in their own watersheds. And it's this collaboration that enables us to have such a significant impact. Our watershed groups are the experts on the ground, making us aware of local issues and concerns. And our statewide orgs like Nature Conservancy and Mass Audubon, they bolster our expertise and our message. We at Mass Rivers serve as a central hub for sharing information and a unified voice advocating for our priorities. And we also provide a direct connection point to engage and partner with state agencies such as the Department of Ecological Restoration, whom you'll hear from shortly. As I said, we advocate for healthy flows, thriving ecosystems, and access to rivers for all. Natural, free-flowing rivers that are healthy and accessible provide a wide range of benefits for people and nature. According to the Department of Agriculture, investments in conservation here in Massachusetts have a return of about 4 to 1 on natural goods and services. Some of these benefits include wildlife habitat, capturing flood flows, sequestering carbon, urban cooling, recharging groundwater, removing pollution, all different kinds of recreation, commercial and subsistence fisheries, increased property values, spiritual expression, and improved public health and well-being are just a few, not to mention the intrinsic values of rivers themselves. Climate change is inhibiting these benefits along with all aspects of life on the planet, as John mentioned. An increase in the frequency and severity of both floods and droughts are wreaking havoc on the water cycle and the infrastructure that we've built to try and control it. Storm events are flushing more pollution into our waterways, and reduced flows from drought are then concentrating those pollutants. This not only decimates the natural ecosystem, but breeds waterborne diseases that harm people and nature. And climate impacts are compounding. Each individual impact exacerbates others. Because rivers both sequester carbon and provide cooling, their restoration or degradation creates a reinforcing feedback loop, either a virtuous or a vicious cycle. These algal blooms starve rivers of oxygen, killing fish, and then as the algae dies, it releases more greenhouse gases into the atmosphere and reduces the cooling effect that rivers provide, thus further driving up temperatures and repeating the cycle. Fortunately, the inverse is true as well. Every step that we take toward mitigation makes the system more resilient to multiple climate impacts. Restoring rivers reduces water temperatures and ambient air temperatures, enabling rivers to sequester more carbon, thus reducing our greenhouse gas load. It also provides healthier habitat for wildlife and better flood protection. We don't have time, but you can extrapolate these feedback mechanisms to the entire socio-ecological system. It's all interconnected. Some of the threats we can avoid by protecting and restoring rivers instead of degrading them include lost fisheries and agricultural production, property loss from extreme storm events, erosion damaging our infrastructure, and healthcare costs from heat stroke. Restoration slows the entire cycle down, reducing the negative impacts of climate change and interrupting and shrinking the snowball effect. Restoring and protecting rivers is also one of the most cost-effective ways to increase our drought resilience. Some studies have shown that the return on investment in improved resilience have, at minimum, a benefit cost ratio of 2-to-1 and as high as 10-to-1. So for every dollar spent on river restoration, you could gain as much as $10 in avoided costs and gained economic benefits. Floodplain restoration in Vermont, for example, reduced annual flooding damage by 20% and provided up to $2 million in avoided damages from extreme storm events. And we have a lot of rivers to work with. Massachusetts has over 8,000 river miles, 1,200 named rivers, and nearly 600,000 acres of wetlands. And 8 of our rivers have received the highest national designation of wild and scenic. Our ecosystems support 432 endangered, threatened, and species of special concern, many of which depend on rivers and streams for at least some portion of their life cycle. Some of these include the three-spine stickleback, American brook lamprey, eastern box turtle, bald eagle, little brown bat, and New England northern reedgrass. I've tried to be equitable and represent fish, plants, mammals, birds, and reptiles. Unfortunately, our development patterns are degrading rivers, threatening their ability to maintain these important functions and provide the multiple benefits we've come to rely on. Over 468 of those 1,200 named rivers and streams are on the federal 303D list. That means they don't meet minimum water quality standards for fishing and swimming. This may not seem like a lot, 468 out of 1,200, but over half of those named rivers and streams, 642 of them, haven't even been evaluated yet. So combined, that leaves less than 10% that are known to be safe for us to swim in and eat fish from. Not a very good record. The fishable, swimmable definition was established 50 years ago, exactly this October, with the passage of the 1972 Clean Water Act. The act stated that all the nation's waters should, at minimum, be safe for us to swim and fish in. We saw a significant improvement in water quality nationwide immediately following the legislation by tackling point source pollution, like discharge pipes from factories. But in the past decade, we've been heading in the wrong direction. Between 2008 and 2018, for example, we saw a 50% increase in listed rivers and streams. This is due in part to climate change, but also a failure to effectively implement existing regulations and adequately update our policies as conditions change. The biggest contributor of water pollution is stormwater runoff, which is a non-point source pollution, which is not well regulated in Massachusetts. And just like our underrepresented and under-resourced communities on the front lines are the most susceptible to the negative impacts of climate change, our degraded rivers are less resilient to these same impacts. Climate change is already here now. We're seeing the impacts all around us, and they will only become more pronounced as the planet continues to warm. We're already experiencing less frequent but more powerful storm events. Our annual precipitation rates are increasing, but it's coming in fewer, more powerful storms. We're also experiencing more frequent, intense, and prolonged droughts. One important note, you can still have heavy storm events, which may even cause flooding during a drought. We could have heavy rainfall during the winter months, but then severe drought comes summertime. Also, when we're experiencing drought conditions and then receive heavy rainfall, less of that rain is able to percolate into the dry, compacted soil. So more of it runs off the land and overwhelms our infrastructure systems. In the past 6 years, Massachusetts has experienced 3 severe droughts, and 2022 will likely be the 4th. In 2016, local farmers suffered $18 million in economic losses due to crop failure, including to our iconic cranberry bogs, because of the drought. Drought reduces flows in our rivers and streams, concentrating those pollutants that harm ecosystems and threaten public health. In 2016 and 2020, both of which were extreme drought years, many of our rivers saw record low flows, and some sections of major rivers like the Ipswich and Parker went dry. When less surface water is available, overusing well water further exacerbates challenges for people and wildlife. Our surface water and groundwater are interconnected. Pumping groundwater can further deplete already stressed streams. We also get our water supply from both groundwater and surface water. Several municipal water supplies were depleted in 2016 and 2020. During the 2016 drought, over 200 private wells went dry. And in 2020, more than 700 acres of wildfire burned in over 1,000 drought-related forest fires. Already this summer, 5 of the state's 7 regions are in at least mild drought, 2 of which are in significant drought. The Northeast region jumped from a level 0 in May to a level 2 in June, which is an unprecedented rapid increase in drought conditions. Impacts we see with this level of drought include reduced agricultural crop yields, like our New England summer corn and tomatoes, decline in honey production, increased wildfires, low stream flows, and some fish kills. The best way to safeguard against the cumulative impacts of drought is to reduce human water use and water waste, leaving more water in streams. Over 50% of residential water use in the US is from watering lawns and gardens. So that's the quickest and easiest place to cut back. But under current regulations, the state can't force you to conserve. So we end up with this patchwork of water use restrictions from town to town, even though many of them are drawing from the same water supply. At Mass Rivers, we're working to address that limitation in the legislative arena, regulatory arena, and at the administrative arena. Legislatively, we're sponsoring the Drought Bill, Senate Bill 530, which would help curb water waste by making outdoor water conservation mandatory during a drought. The bill's currently stuck in the Senate Ways and Means Committee. We're doing everything we can to get it out. We also advocate in the legislature for increased state budget allocations to the agencies and programs whose responsibility it is to protect and restore rivers. For example, over the past 5 years, we've successfully advocated for quadrupling in the budget for the Department of Ecological Restoration, enabling them to expand their critical work. You'll hear more about that from Beth Lambert next. In the regulatory arena, Mass Rivers is appointed as a representative on the Water Management Act Advisory Committee, which sets guidelines, well, the Management Act sets guidelines for how much water the Department of Environmental Protection can allow withdrawals from our waterways and what users have to do to mitigate those impacts. And we're pushing DEP to change the regulations to include mandatory conservation during drought. And then administratively, we serve on the Drought Management Task Force, which is organized by the Executive Office of Energy and Environmental Affairs. It's a multi-agency and stakeholder group that reviews all of the best available data to determine the specific drought levels and actions that need to be taken. The task force had their third meeting of the season yesterday, and based on their discussion, we can expect to see some regions advancing to level 2 or significant drought. We're doing all we can at the Alliance to help our river ecosystems weather the drought, and you can help too. A few different ways. One, if you're in Massachusetts, use the action alert guide on our website to contact Senate Ways and Means and your senators and ask them to pass the drought bill. Legislative session ends July 31st, so this is urgent. Number two, send Mass Rivers pictures, videos, stories, any other evidence you have of drought impacts that you're witnessing, and we can use this on the Drought Management Task Force. Three, conserve water, regardless of where you live in the country, across the planet. Reduce your own water use, ask your neighbors to do the same, even if your municipality or water provider isn't requiring it. And four, support projects and initiatives in your community that protect and restore rivers, like those that Beth Lambert will share with you next. Thank you, and I look forward to our discussion.
Thank you very much, Danielle. I understand that one of the important contributions of the Mass Rivers Alliance, besides pursuing these legislative agendas, is also to support some of the state activities of Beth Lambert's program. And so, Beth, I would like you to tell us about how you see the present situation from the point of view of the Division of Ecological Restoration, and what you do, and what you think about what we can do going forward. I will note that we have a paradox of drought combined with torrential rains. In the midst of the drought, Danielle emphasized reducing use, but she mentioned that the major contributor was to pollution is stormwater runoff. And I would imagine that stormwater runoff and how the water in the rivers travels and where it ends up is one of your major concerns. So Beth, tell us about what you and your organization do.
Thank you very much, John. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for being here today. It's wonderful that Massachusetts has so many people that care about rivers and wetlands and are here learning about what we can do better to protect them. So Paula invited me to speak about our division's dam removal and river restoration work. So in the next few minutes, I'm going to be sharing with you a little bit about dam removal and how when we remove unwanted dams, we really unleash the power of nature to help people as well as nature. So I'm the director of the Massachusetts Division of Ecological Restoration, or DER, as we usually refer to it. And DER is part of the Massachusetts Department of Fish and Game. Our mission is to restore and protect rivers, wetlands, and watersheds for the benefit of people and the environment. We work throughout the state in partnership with federal, state, and local organizations, including municipalities, nonprofit organizations, landowners, and many others. And we carry out projects such as dam removal, freshwater wetland restoration, coastal wetland restoration, culvert upgrades, and many other projects that restore rivers and wetlands. And all of those projects restore nature and also help people adapt to climate change. So I have two take-home messages today that I'm hoping you'll leave this talk with. The first is that in light of the many stressors on our rivers and streams that Danielle spoke about, dam removal is one of the best things that we can do to help our rivers cope with both the damage of pollution and also the stress of climate change, whether it's drought or extreme storms. And then second, the best way to do this is through partnerships. And so my second point is that this partnership-based model of all areas of government and nonprofit and landowners and agencies working together is the best model to get not only river restoration done, but climate adaptation in general. So I'm going to start by talking a little bit about dams with you, and then I will talk about dam removal. So Massachusetts has more than 3,000 dams that we know about. A few minutes ago, I believe Danielle said that Massachusetts has about 8,000 river miles. So 8,000 river miles, 3,000 dams, that is a lot of dams. This slide shows you some of the dam removal work that's going on in the state or has been completed. The green triangles are dam removal projects that are underway currently. And then the orange circles are dam removal projects that have been completed. So there's been quite a bit of work to try to address dams in Massachusetts. So next, I'm going to explain where all these dams came from. So the majority of dams in Massachusetts were built first in the 16 and 1700s and into the 1800s to power mills. And they were built primarily, the majority of these dams were built to power small mills. And the water turned the machinery of the mill, which then manufactured all the materials that people needed at that time, whether it was nails or wooden boards or cotton. So in the 1900s, the majority of those dams were abandoned as a source of power for mills. That abandonment occurred throughout the 1800s. And by the 1900s, dams were really no longer useful for most manufacturing operations. And so those 3,000 dams that you saw in my earlier picture were for the large part, taken out of active use. Many no longer served their purpose and they started to deteriorate and decay. This slide shows you examples of what some of these dams look like around the state. So now I want to talk a little bit about the ecological effects of dams. So dams have many impacts. The major one that people think of right off the bat is that dams prevent fish from moving upstream. And that is true, and that is a major impact that dams have. So because dams block fish, it means that fish are not able to get to the parts of the watershed that they need to get to in different parts of their life cycle. Or if one stream is dry or suffering the effects of drought more than another, dams prevent fish from finding more beneficial areas to live. So that's the first major impact. The second impact is water quality related. So dams back up water, they cause the water to spread out into an impoundment. That water spread out and shallow captures more solar radiation and warms much faster than water in a narrower free-flowing stream does. And so impoundments formed by dams are often much warmer than is natural. That water, which is warm, then flows over the top of the dam and downstream, which contributes to thermal pollution downstream. This is important because Massachusetts native fish and wildlife and organisms that rely on free-flowing rivers can't survive in that warm water. And so the native biodiversity that we have in Massachusetts is severely impacted by this temperature increase caused by dams. So that's the second major impact that dams have. And then the third impact is that dams trap sediment behind them. Ideally, that sediment would be flowing throughout the river system. Sediment is a normal part of the river system. It could be anything from sand to silt to cobbles and gravel in the bed of the river. And it's needed to build habitat throughout the river and to keep up our salt marshes in our estuaries. So those are the three types of impacts that dams have ecologically. Dams have a significant impact on human communities also, particularly in public safety, but also in other ways. For example, by state law in Massachusetts, dam owners are responsible for having their dams inspected regularly by a qualified dam engineer and keeping their dams in good repair in line with the state regulations. So that's a major cost that dam owners face. Second, dam owners are also liable can be held liable for any damage or injury to people or to property stemming from how they're managing their dam. So that means that if someone is playing on a dam owned by someone else and they injure themselves, the dam owner can be held liable. If a dam bursts catastrophically, a dam owner can be held liable. And so this liability is a significant concern for many dam owners. In terms of public safety, there's really two areas of concern. One is that is the concern over a catastrophic breach. With the increase in large storms and flooding that we've been seeing with climate change, these aging dams are under greater and greater stress. And so the concern of a catastrophic breach during a flood is growing. And then the second is simply that dams back up water behind them. They elevate the water surface. And so that can cause upstream flooding, so flooding upstream from dams during storms. And so that's the second type of public safety impact that dams have. So when you think of the ecological impacts that I just described and the public safety impacts that I just described, and then you multiply that by the more than 3,000 dams across the state, you can imagine that the cumulative effects on river ecology throughout the state are significant. And also the public safety effects are significant. Every community in Massachusetts is dealing with one or more aging dams that is of concern. So this problem exists throughout the state. So now we are entering a period which is really a dam removal movement. As the climate has changed and as we've seen more and more floods, more and more stress on our aging dams, and as people have recognized the significant ecosystem impacts of those dams, there's growing interest in removing them when the dam is unwanted. And so one of the things that our division does is work in partnership with dam owners that are interested in removing their dams. And in doing that, we pull together a range of organizations, from federal funders to state grant programs to nonprofit organizations such as watershed groups that are advocating for their rivers, and many others. And we work as a team to remove unwanted dams in partnership with the owners. So this slide shows you several pictures of dam removals in action, as well as two pictures of dams that have not yet been removed, but are planned for removal. And I put this up here because removing a dam, actually doing the construction is really the easy part. The hard part is all the planning, carrying out the engineering and design, working one-on-one with community members to help them understand what the river will look like after the dam is gone, pulling together local stakeholders and working through the project with stakeholders, working through permitting and raising funds for construction. The planning process can take anywhere from 3 to 5 years or longer for a dam removal project. And the partners for that project are key. Without partners, these projects won't go anywhere. And so while the dam removal activity itself is very photogenic and extremely exciting, the real proof of the project is in that planning time. I'm going to show you now a couple of pictures of before and after, so you get a sense of what a river looks like when you take out a dam. This is a picture of a dam removal in Taunton in August of 2012. And the next slide, if you could switch to the next slide, will show immediately after. So what I want to show you here, this is right after the dam was removed. One of the things that dams do is that by backing up water, they essentially drown the floodplain. Floodplains are needed to absorb floodwaters. And when you remove a dam, one of the things you do is restore that floodplain function, which is a critical resilience action as the climate continues to change. So what this photo shows you is that immediately after the dam comes out, before the vegetation has regrown, you're able to look at the kind of the landscape skeleton here, and you can see that floodplain, which was previously submerged by water, but is now open. It'll grow into a wetland and will be ready to absorb future floodwaters. I also want to point out that this sort of bare phase of this project lasts only a couple months. So you have to get these pictures right after the dam comes out, because shortly thereafter, the vegetation grows up. This shows the same exact perspective, same river a few years later. And so now you can see on the right, we have active floodplain wetland. And that during storms, this river is now more resilient and the neighborhood is more resilient because there is more floodplain available to absorb floodwaters. This is a dam, which I'll also show you before and after photos from. This is the dam in Taunton during the 1960s. And when this dam almost failed and caused an evacuation of the downtown area. The dam was repaired at that time, and but it almost failed again in 2005 and was repaired again. That wooden structure that we saw in the last photo was removed, and a pile of rocks was placed up against the remnant concrete dam, which was about 8 feet high. And so by the time this dam became a dam removal project, this is what it looked like. So this dam was removed in 2013, and I'm also going to show you what this site looked like immediately after removal. So this photo was taken from a similar vantage point. This is 18 months later. And so you can see that that pond receded, became a free-flowing river, and where the pond had once been a floodplain wetland developed. This grew on its own, and now this floodplain is able to absorb floodwaters for the benefit of the community and also for the benefit of nature. So in the last few minutes, I've given you a quick overview of dam removal in Massachusetts. And I want to reiterate that when you remove dams, you're restoring not only nature, you're not only helping the native fish community, the wildlife that depend on free-flowing rivers, but you're also unleashing the power of that river to protect people in turn, to create a more resilient human community in the face of climate change. And then second, the best way to do that is by working in partnership across all levels of government and with municipalities, nonprofits, and landowners. That is the best way to get restoration and climate adaptation done. So thank you. I'm looking forward to the discussion.
Thank you, Beth. You know, a number of questions have come in from the audience having to do with rainwater harvesting and the whole question of how does the water that we do have access to get disposed of? Where does it go? On the one hand, I learned from your presentation that those floodplains are potential reservoirs for storms. But I also recognize that when you remove dams, the water flows more freely. And I'm wondering whether, and this is an anticipation of Michal's presentation, whether we know in Massachusetts about whether dam removal ultimately increases the amount of water that flows out into the ocean, or whether we are assuring that as much of that water as possible ends up being absorbed into the soil and then ultimately into the plants and animals that regulate the climate. Do we know about the net effect of these dam removals on water going into the ground versus into the ocean?
We do in Massachusetts, but I will defer to Michal in his presentation.
Well, can you tell us what the case is for Massachusetts?
Sure, yeah. So the dams in Massachusetts store very little water. They do not moderate the stream flow regime in any way. They are more like, if you think about a speed bump in a parking lot, you know, the speed bump doesn't block the cars. It slows them down, but the cars just go over and keep on going. And so these dams are just like that. And so when you take out a dam, you're actually not changing in any way the stream flow regime. All you're doing is reducing the elevation that water it was sitting at. So that's one of the fortunate things, is that we can remove dams without in any way impacting water availability. That's because these are small dams. If we were talking about, the large dams that you see out west, the gigantic reservoirs, we might be talking a little bit differently, but we're not. These are just small dams.
Great,
And
thank you.
John, I just wanted to add briefly that that water flowing from rivers out to the ocean is an important and necessary part of the water cycle and the carbon cycle. There's a lot of rhetoric, and especially in the western part of the country, about not, quote, wasting it to the sea, but we need rivers to be flowing to the sea to maintain healthy, safe functioning, and also to help sequester carbon.
And what is the contribution that water flowing out to the sea makes in terms of resilience and mitigation?
It's enabling the river or stream itself to continue providing all of the habitat benefits that it does by maintaining healthy flow levels, so not too much in the stream and not drying out. It also carries sediment out to the sea so that the river doesn't get clogged, so we still have good fish habitat and fish passage. Also carries carbon holding sediment and biological materials that are in the water out into the ocean that then get stuck there for hundreds of thousands of years, as opposed to being released into the atmosphere.
A really interesting answer. The interconnections among these things is, of course, where all the action is, and it's very complex. One of the insights is that, of course, our natural systems has evolved to promote that complexity in such a way that it supports life. And as we interfere with that, that's where all of the degradation comes from. So in some ways, the question is, how do you reestablish the conditions that will allow these natural systems to reassert themselves in the way that they happen to evolve to do? And to address those larger issues of the larger interactions, we have Michal Kravcik, who has been looking at these larger principles of water management and their impact on the larger system. So Michal, before we go to general discussion, I look forward to your presentation.
Good morning, everybody. I'm happy to be here and to speak from Slovakia to Massachusetts. And I will be speaking a little about this my experience in my group from 30 years ago, which we started to establish NGO People and Water, and just now with this water holistic management consulting company, which are explain and help to services how to be more success on water in nature. I will be more speak about this relationship between not only flow of water on the landscape in catchment areas and rivers, but in atmosphere, because we know about these water cycles, and water is vapor to atmosphere. After condensate create clouds, and after clouds is raining again to return to our space and bring new life. And we need to deeply understood from my perspective, it's water, it's water cycle. It is real water reservoir. It's like water dam, but it's in integration between landscape and skies. And we know that this system for integrity is extremely important for our sustainability and so on. And we in Slovakia obtained some knowledges from research how is this water cycle is in degradation. It's this growing of time and space, change of distribution of rain. I will be a little speak about that and what it means for our perspective, especially for Massachusetts and US. And we are starting to 30 years ago, and in conflict in water dam. And I am graduate on Technical University. I'm expert for water dam, but we were not against water dam, but we are prepared some alternative solution. and this blue alternative, which means how is create better conditions for catchment areas and ecosystem, and to protect water and harvest water, to absorb soil and vapor to atmosphere and produce of vegetation, and return to small water cycle, because it's small water cycle is this really key element for sustainability, for not only for environment but economical level and cultural and sustainability and security on the globe. And yeah, it is about these small water cycles, and we learn on the school, but it's water is followed down from sky, and it's this is quite interesting that we forgot that this water which are followed down from sky, from clouds, it is dependent on the vapor water from landscape. If we are change of some landscape, the water run off to sea, to streams and rivers and to sea, and it is contribution to is a real contribution to sea level rise, and this water not return to ecosystem, because this water in a small water cycle recycled every 8 days. Yeah, and we make some deep research in Slovakia, and this is one. It's from this is look about this. With plazis is in mountains is growing of precipitation, in lowlands is decreasing precipitation, and we starting to deeply understood about this reality between water and energy, sun and energy system on evapotranspiration, and what is mean reflection between vapor water to atmosphere, consumption of solar energy, and change of differences of the land due to human activities like the agro policy, agriculture policy, how is change of landscape, and sealing, paving, asphalting, and roofing, how is have impact on the degradation of small water cycle and loss of water from Slovakia. We analyzed that from Slovakia last century was lost annually about 250 million cubic meter of rainwater, with water before that saturate to soil and vapor to atmosphere and produce new rain. And just now it is our real contribution to sea level rise, and from history, especially from last century, lost from Slovakia 15 billion tons of water. It is a lot, and just now, for example, its temperature, it's in Slovakia is completely crazy, and its climate is completely crazy, because it's from every cubic meter which are vapor to atmosphere is consumed 700 kilowatt hours of solar energy. If it's water lost from ecosystem, after that it's solar energy transformed to sensible heat. It is a real overheat around our life.
Michal?
Yeah.
I want to make sure I'm following this, because you've added a really interesting perspective here. Danielle and Beth have been focusing, of course, on water on the ground. But I think, if I understood what you're saying, that water in the atmosphere is, of course, the source of rain, but it also becomes the conduit that brings moisture back from the oceans into the rivers, if it's handled correctly. And that actually leads to an increase in rain. Did I get that right?
Yeah, and it's water which are vapor from oceans, for example, from Atlantic City, it is water from big water cycle. But balance on in Slovakia, for example, is about 66% of water balance are from small water cycles. And it's from this balance is annually lost about 1%. And it's 1%, this process was starting after Second World War. It is real dangerous situation and lost a lot of water from small water cycle, because from ocean is not more water, no increase of evapotranspiration to atmosphere, mostly on the recycling of water on the system. It is from small water cycles, and we know that it's recycling of water in small water cycle is average in 8 days, and from big water cycle is around 3 months. Which means if we are lost all water from small water cycle by degradation of ecosystem, after that it is loss of water which are before that offer of create raining. And after that it's created, yes?
I'm sorry to interrupt. I think you will help me, and I suspect some of our listeners, if you remind us the difference between what you're calling the small water cycle and the big water cycle.
Yeah, it is necessary to deeply understand about a relationship between small and big water cycle. Small water cycle is water which are vapor from a landscape, from ecosystem to atmosphere. This is extremely important because rainwater is coming absorbed to soil by vegetation, vapor water to atmosphere. And water which are runoff by stream and river to sea, it is water from big water cycle. But if from small water cycle, it is by change of landscape on catchment areas, it's lost a lot of water, which means it is this balance of water in small water cycles is loss and loss and loss, and on the end of this process is completely desert zones, like Sahara, like Australia, like central part of US in Colorado River and so on. This is about huge, massive problem in California too, because it's problem about California. We know about this reality. Yeah, yeah. This is about this in time line. If this infiltration from rain is decreasing, after that is evapotranspiration is decreasing too. And on the end of this process is, if it's annually lost 1% from balance of small water cycle, it is completely empty of 100 years. And after that, we are completely dependent on the big water cycle. And big water cycle is coming 3 months per 3 times per year or twice per year, and this is massive water. This is extremely dangerous. We need soft water, which is coming weekly or daily, like in the rainforest, because its water from small water cycle is decreasing, 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 with increasing of extremality of weather, extremality of climate system in atmosphere. It is like a conflict between energy system and loss of rainfall, which is extremely bad, sad news for perspective. But next time I will be speak a little about this good news. Solution exists. Solution is very simple, very easy, but we need to deeply understand what is mean, how is working small water cycle, what is management of landscape, how to manage of rainwater, because we are still thinking that rainwater from sky is waste. Rainwater from sky, it is not waste, it is gift from God, gift from sky. And we need to absorb to our life because we are completely dependent on this principle. Okay. Yeah, and here is example about this conflict between a drainage system and irrigation system in park. It is completely misunderstanding and is engineering solution. Yeah, and it's if you are looking over Massachusetts country, look above this down graph is above this precipitation on the more than 2 inches in summertime. In summertime is less is quite stable, but in summertime is temperature is more heat. But in outside from summer, which means winter, autumn and spring, it is growing extreme precipitation less 2 inches. It is too dangerous, and it is conflict between floods reality and desertification process. And it is really results from degradation of small water cycle, because Massachusetts, Boston area, and in other cities, urban zones, the same like in Slovakia, in Roma, in New York, the same for degradation to loss to channelize of rainwater and to support the runoff rainwater to the sea. Yeah, and it is after that is conflict about this reality, and this is a real example about Superstorm Sandy from 2012 and how massive clouds are on the New England in U.S. territory, and inside on in the U.S. is no clouds, no rain. And it's 2012 was extremely historical agricultural drought inside in Dakota, in Kentucky, and so on. And problem is about to understanding because it's this routed of biopumping principle, because it's, if we are creating a huge massive heat islands inside, after that is this whole raining is coming on the east coastal zones, and it's extremely dangerous situation for reality of communities on the coastal zone. Next slides, please. Yeah, this is about this drought and superstorm. Look how is this boundary between heat islands and east coastal zone. What is mean for creation hurricanes and superstorm on the east coastal zones. If you need to decreasing of influence of big water cycles, balance of water, and it is possible to create more cool zone in central part of US. Yeah, this is about reality on the South Dakota. It is conflict between inside on US and, for example, in the East Coastal zones. This is picture from Massachusetts, and this is drainage system. You have some campaign for fish protection, but with all water from channel system overflow to canal, to river, and to sea. This is from every square meter. It is minimum 500, 600, 700 liters per year loss from ecosystem. And before that, before paving, was with water was saturated to soil and vapor to atmosphere. Next one, slides. Yeah, it is problem about conflict between agro-urban zones, which is completely dry, and mountains and cold zones. And this is new reality. And why am I speaking? Because we are need deeply understand, because if you are looking over Vermont, which is great green state, and if you are looking how is growing about this precipitation last 50 years, it is some high level, and it is influence from restoring of nature, but no restoring outside, which mean more cool zone bringing more raining, and it is with growing of precipitation to green zone and cold zone too. Yeah, we need to discussion for, this is about relation between sea level rise from desertification. And we are speaking on the media campaign, how is iceberg increasing of sea level rise, but we don't speak about this desertification of continent, impact on the sea level rise. And we calculate on the Slovakian case how much water lost from all continents. If Slovakia is average country of desertification, is 760 billion tons of water, which means on the sea level territory is 2.1 millimeters. Yeah, it is good news that if you are starting to to increase infiltration and recharge rainwater on the catchments, ecosystem. After that is evapotranspiration. It's not lost. Evapotranspiration by vegetation create a new clouds, a new rain, which means it is starting to regenerate of small water cycles everywhere. It is great possibility, very cheap, very effective, and very sustainable solution with accept economical needs which we need to for harmony and stabilization of economy for society. Next one slide. Yeah, this is new water paradigm, which you can read if you like. It is free for everybody. Next one slide. Yeah, we have a short time and we need to more. This is concrete solution from my urban zones and how is very fast is the regenerate of landscape and from yellow to green because we have bring water, which is completely rainwater. It's not water from type. And stop desertification and bring back water and vegetation. It is everything. It is some best solution with carbon sequestration, biodiversity increasing, production of biomass, recycling of nutrients. We are speaking of a globe about this cycle economy, but we don't understand what is meant for water. We are still water cycle pushed for open and to loss of water from the system to finish. Yeah, and US, you have a lot of trouble with hurricanes, tornado, floods, drought, and with Jane Lambert, which died this year, we are calculate a lot of data, and we are starting to prepare American Action Plan for restoring of recovery of the climate system and small water cycle. And what is mean for Massachusetts next? And we calculate for every state and look about with Alabama, Arizona, and so on. Next slides, please, because it's Massachusetts is interesting for you. With 20 Massachusetts, you need to create with 170 million cubic meter of water retention measures. And this concept can to create a new water sources, 8,000 liters per second, decreasing production on sensible heat. You need to invest more than $1 billion with creation thousands of jobs for people. And it's like a new deal for America, new water deal for America, if you like. Or next two slides, and I finish. Next one. The same everybody, and we prepare this program on the Košice. It is my region. It's 7,000 square kilometer. And look, we are create this concept for 60 million cubic meter of water retention measures. We need invest 400 million euros, 3,000 new jobs, carbon sequestration, 1.8 million tons clear carbon, and we need for this CO2 6.6 million ton of CO2 from atmosphere, with increasing of crop yield annually, 30 million, water sources creation, decreasing of sensible heat, increasing of latent heat to atmosphere, and decreasing of temperature, and so on. And everybody are happy. It is my last slides. And sorry for we have not a lot of time for discussion, but
well, thank you, Michal. Thank you very much. It's the layers of interaction here are what really impresses me, and I want to give our panelists a chance to interact with each other. But I'd like to take a minute and just see if I can tie these together. We've talked about the movement of physical water past dams into rivers and down into the ocean. But of course, the water also travels through the air. And that water flow, which is uphill water flow, happens because of the vegetation, which happens because the soil has been hydrated. The movement of water, therefore, from the soil into the atmosphere and then across continents actually, if I understand you, explains why we have drought in the West, why we have extreme temperature, extreme rainfall events in the East, and the changes in the sea level. But I think all of you are pointing to the importance, and Paula, pointing to the importance of vegetation and ample moist soil, not only in holding that water, but restoring the climate cycle, which brings us to some of the questions that have come in from the audience. One of the interesting techniques has to do with check dams. The notion that when water is flowing through streams, to the extent that it can be slowed down in small ways, not stopped as with dams, but just given time to percolate into the soil, that also can rehydrate the soil and reduce the possibility of huge rainfall and increase the amount of evapotranspiration and the small water cycle. I'm wondering whether our panelists are used to thinking about those processes and whether you have any questions or comments about this dynamic, which suggests that we have a way of impacting the global climate as well as these local hydrological conditions.
Yeah, and it's this is two elements which we need to starting to deeply understand. One element is this rainwater, and second is the CO2, and another element is sun, energy from sun. Three elements starting to produce photosynthesis in one place, but for example on the ecosystem. But if water loss from ecosystem, after that its energy flow to atmosphere, it is sensible heat, and the result is completely overheat. And another, it is not CO2 is not sequestrated to vegetation, to biomass, to soil, and it's flow to atmosphere. It is lost, and the CO2 is the real keystone of our life, together with water in energy. And last 60 years was degraded on the globe a 19 million square kilometer of lands, which means decreasing of water on this place, decreasing of sequestration of carbon and overheat. And this new reality, which
So my question is, and Beth, I suspect that you may know something about that, but is it possible for people to experience these benefits where they do the work? Are there local impacts to be had from doing the kinds of things that your department does, now that we understand that they also are contributing to the global pattern?
Yeah, and we just now.
I'm sorry, I'd like to give Beth a chance.
And this methodology is create this condition how to regenerate ecosystem on the local level. Very effective.
Beth?
Yeah, I think, John, you raised a really good point. And the amazing thing about these kinds of restoration projects is that you can have the local benefits, which you can see and are tangible. And you can watch them unfold in front of your eyes within your neighborhood and within your community, but then also feel good about the broader benefits, to the river. It's sort of scalable. There's the benefits to your community and your piece of the river, and then there's the benefit to the river network, and that also improves the link between the land and the ocean, as you were talking about earlier. It benefits the whole watershed. So being able to see the scaling up of benefits while you're experiencing them in your own backyard is a really powerful experience.
So there is one other class of question that we haven't gotten to address, but we've had lots of people prior to this event asking this question, which is, if we don't have steam shovels and access to dams that we can tear down, what can people do with their own yards or their own neighborhoods or their own communities to be part of this general solution? Danielle or Beth, can you give our listeners a chance, some hints?
Yeah, a general solution is this keep rainwater on the lands, which means to create condition for every drop of rainwater to stay on the ecosystem. It's some best, but it is absolutely not possible. It is necessary to manage the landscape, to harvest, and historically, if we are looking over the last century, was built a lot of dams in Slovakia, in US, and so on. But we harvest water to water reservoir, but completely destroy of ecosystem on outside, which means it is from this ecosystem. And I have example from Georgia, from Caucasus, how was degraded of and change of system after management of landscape, because we are still thinking, oh, it is natural source, so we can use, and after that is nothing. Yeah, on the end it is zero, and this is a problem.
So Danielle and Beth, do you have programs that provide guidance to people in Massachusetts and elsewhere about what they can do with their own patches of land to contribute to this solution?
Do you want to start, Danielle, or do you want me to start?
I'm gonna let you go ahead because you're already unmuted.
Okay, to answer the question, so the Division of Ecological Restoration does not have that type of guidance. However, there are many organizations throughout Massachusetts that do provide that kind of guidance and help local residents make good decisions about water conservation and keeping water on their land. And so there's a couple places that I would point people. One would be to the Massachusetts Rivers Alliance. You know, Danielle's organization is an incredible resource for residents and organizations throughout the state. And then the other would be their local watershed association. Many watershed associations work really, really hard to put these kinds of materials, trainings, guidance together for local landowners. So whether you're looking to have a rain barrel, you want to do greenscaping on your property to reduce water use, there are lots of tools and lots of information available for you as a resident of Massachusetts.
Thank you. Well, so now that you mention it, the website for ecorestorationalliance.net has a page called Practice, which talks about some of these practices and does have a number of the resources you've mentioned to help people, advise people about what they can do in their own yards and in their own communities. And Michal would like to point out that one of the things we can do is to point out that the sewage systems, those little gutters that treat water as a waste project, should be starved as much as possible so that the water actually goes into vegetation in the soil rather than going literally down the drain and straight out to the ocean without producing the benefits that Danielle was talking about earlier. We are out of time. I want to thank our guests, Danielle Dolan, Beth Lambert, Michal Kravcik, our host, Paula Phipps, GBH, and all of you who can follow up by going to the websites that were mentioned, to the GBH site, to Biodiversity for a Livable Climate, that's bioforclimate.org, and ecorestorationalliance.net. This video will be available, and hopefully for many of us, this is the beginning of your process of earth healing, not merely the end of our episode. Thank you all.